Is there? Yeah, there's no coincidence. So there must be a correlation between the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam. But what I want to do, I want to do something very specific. I want to look at a few laws in the Rambam and a few laws in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, and basically kind of see the process of how, for lack of a better word, how you're supposed to learn these laws. Like what's the methodology to learning these halachot? And I'm just going to jump right in because we already covered the basics, a little bit about the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe last week, and you can always search and Google, and I've got classes on both, and many other people have plenty of classes. So let's start with the Rambam. The Rambam, what I did is the following thing. In the handouts you have it's Hilchos Ishus from Seder Nashon, the section on relationships, the subsection of marriage, halacha beis. Now, what I wanted to do is I'm starting to study the Rif on Kiddushin. Now, who is the Rif? Rabbi Alfasi. So Rabbi Alfasi was the teacher of the Rimigash, and the Rimigash was the teacher of the Rambam's father. And the Rambam received a blessing and had an actual, meaningful interaction as a child with the Rimigash. So he considered the Rimigash his actual teacher, even though it was really his father that was his teacher. But he considered it as significant as being the teacher of the Rimigash. And therefore, he fell squarely into the tradition of the Rif, of Rabbi Alfasi. And that's who he says, I almost always follow like him. Now, at some point, somebody said, how many times do you disagree? So earlier on, he said, yeah, very few times. A little later, he said about 30 times. The truth is, it depends. That's a question of how to see whether what you call a disagreement. Is it a clear disagreement? Is it a small disagreement? And that number could be very much expanded on. So I have a project that I'd like somebody else to do, but I'll suggest it, which is to go through the Rif and to look up the Rambam and see if the Rambam agrees with the Rif, disagrees with the Rif, or perhaps doesn't agree or disagree, but adds in something else that the Rif doesn't mention. And if you do that, you can understand within the framework of where the Rambam was coming out of, the school that he already believed in, to what extent was he innovative within that framework? Because some people say the Rambam, wow, he was so innovative, but they're forgetting to acknowledge that he was part of a chain of a tradition. He didn't come out of nowhere. He didn't have nothing to base himself on. He didn't just have the Talmud, but he had a father who had a Rebbe, who his teacher was a master of halacha. And therefore, the Rambam was basing almost everything in halacha on him. But that is way oversimplified, that statement, because he changes so many things, sometimes very subtly, or adds in something without us knowing what he's really saying until you study the source material. So I want to start that project with you tonight. As I believe in you. Because maybe, look, this is a one-shot project for you, maybe for me. I have a suspicion I'm going to go a little bit into this. I don't think I'm going to devote my life's work to this, but I'll do a little bit of it here and there. But there's somebody out there who's going to be like, this is a worthwhile project. This is a PhD. This is 5 years in yeshiva. I'm going to do it, So you'll see in Halacha Beis, what? You're not going to pick yourself. I'm not picking. So the Rambam says, we're talking about Case of the Isha Miskadeshes, we're talking about the laws of Kiddushin. Kiddushin is always translated in the art school Gemara as betrothal, which is an incorrect translation. It actually means marriage without benefits. It means you're technically, halachically married. The woman is an Eshes Ish, yet they don't have the benefits of marriage. Like many of the conditions of the ketubah are not in effect. They're not living together as man and wife, but they are in fact married for all other purposes. Chuppah. Now, halacha. So in that context, the Rambam is going to be talking about when the right actions and words and intentions constitute Kiddushin, this arrangement that we call marriage, the first stage of marriage, the marriage without benefits called Kiddushin. And let's just translate as the man taking the woman and into this exclusive relationship that we define as marriage, okay? For practical purposes. So here's the case. Usually the man gives the woman something of value, and he tells the woman, Harei ad mekudeshes li. Today we say b'tabazu kadat Moshe b'Yisrael, which means you are mekudesh, married to me, with this ring according to the laws of Moses in Israel. Well, what if there's a change there? What if there's a feminist who says, you know what, I'm not taking your ring and listening to you tell me that. I'm gonna give it to you. And I'm gonna tell you. Does that work? What do you think?
In certain neighborhoods of the Upper West Side, it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
And, spiritually, I don't think that's exactly what
So let's see what he says. So the halacha beis from the beginning says, Nasna hi v'armelo hareni mekudeshes la. He gives it. He says, I am married to you, sanctified to you. Hareni mereses la, harei lachal isha. I'm your wife. The word arusa is another word for Kiddushin. Or any language that says that she is agreeing to be his in this marital relationship. The Rambam rules, like the Gemara, that it doesn't take effect. They're not married, both single. What if she gives the valuable thing, but he does the speaking, and the mekudeshes? Also, does not, the Kiddushin, the marriage doesn't take effect. What about Nasan hu va'amrahi? That's what I underline. He gives the thing of value to her, and she does the speaking. Harezu mekudeshes misafek. The Rambam says they are married out of doubt, meaning they may be married. So what do you do when you may be married? You either get married all the way, or you get a divorce. You get a get. Now, just in case they are married, just in case you got to get, because what if the Kiddushin took effect? You're in a no man's land. So just get a divorce. Well, let's look at the Rif. Let's go backwards. The Rif came before the Rambam. We'll take a look at the Rif and see what the Rif says. The Rif, 1,000 years ago. I'm not good at math, but I think it's before the 1300s. What do you mean? 1,000 years ago was 1300s? What are we now in? We're not in 2300. We're in 2000. I'm glad I'm not the only one who's not good at math here. Yeah, okay. Three generations. Yeah, yeah. He was the generation. He would have been the generation of the great grandfather of the Rambam. So about 900 and change years ago. Yeah, yeah. No, but if the Rambam was nearly 900 years ago, and he would have been about 100 years ago, so it's close to 1,000 years ago. You could. I don't have Google right now, so just Google it. You'll get. It was probably 1,000. Yeah, let's move on. There's no reason to speculate anymore. We all have computers. Look at it on your own time. But just to give you a vague idea, we're talking about 1,100 years ago, close to 1,000 years ago. So, what does the Rif say about this subject, about this same scenario? And here's what the Rif says. He says, "Chashinan midirabanan." We consider it something that we should be careful about rabbinically, which sounds usually that midaraisa, there is no actual suffix, there is no actual doubt. But the rabbis say, since you did something that somebody might misunderstand to be a Kiddushin, you should get a get that the rabbis tell you to get. But not because there's an actual suffix to oraisa. You understand? So that right away, on face value, means there's a machlokus between the Rif and the Rambam. Yes. Or get married, because I'm not going to repeat myself. I say something once, you know already. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Now look, the Ron brings up a very big question, is when we say that maybe, arguably, there's such a thing as when there is a get, when there is a Kiddushin suffix, maybe the whole idea of a Kiddushin suffix is only Kiddushin on a rabbinic level, because we should really put a woman back on her chazaka and her presumed status of not being. So that's something that Ram brings up. I don't want to read that into here, but that's just one thing right off the bat that shows you that the Rif and the Rambam aren't always on the same page. Now let's continue. The other thing I wanted to share with you here, turn the page. And the truth is, there is some analysis we could do here, but there's so much to do, and we're running so late. So if you look at number two is the end of Halacha Vav. It's also chapter 3. And here it's a bunch of terminology that the Gemara is asking whether they could be considered language of Kiddushin. The Ran and many other Rishonim say that the woman understands what's being said. Okay, so what the case is, I'll start about 4 lines above what I highlighted. Amalai kasala harat ishti harat urusasi or harat kanuyali. If the man told the woman the following languages, you're my wife, you're my arusa, you are acquired to me. Actually, you are me. You are in my jurisdiction. You are my skuka. You are lukuchati. Now, here's the key word. Hare at charufati. You are my charufa. And similar terms like this, things like that. Harezu mekudeshes. Now, let me ask you something. Does anybody know what hare at charufati means here, or anywhere for that matter? Charufa. Charif is spicy, but here it comes from something else. It's based on a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says on, I believe it's the following thing. What is what is charufa? Okay. Is that a language of Kiddushin? And there's a brisa that says it is, because in Yehuda they call an arusa, this early stage of marriage, a charufa. And the Torah says, Yehuda, Haviruba Alma, is Yehuda considered the majority of the world? The Gemara says, no. What it is there's a verse that says, it's a verse on the 19th chapter of Vayikra that's talking about a servant that's somehow connected to a man. And we don't know the relationship between what type of servant she is. Is she a Shifcha Kananis? And there's no marriage to Shifcha Kananis? Or is she Chatzia Shivcha, Chatzia Baschon? Is she somebody who's a half servant, half free? And then if she is half free, can half of a person be married or not? That's the debate. So there's a double debate here. So one way to learn this Gemara, this is the way Rashi learns it, this is the way the Ram learns it, and presumably this is the way the Rambam learns it, is as follows. The Gemara will say there's a context, there's already an existing debate on who is this verse talking about. He shift on the translation. Is it a woman who has some element of Kiddushin, of being able to be in a relationship of Kiddushin to some degree, or not? And if she is, then that verse suggests to us that charufa is a term that could be seen on the side of Kiddushin, to mean Kiddushin. If not, then it's something else. We don't know what it is then. Okay. Why? The Gemara ends off by saying, only in Yehuda, even though there's a verse, the verse does not mean that, and ultimately says that only in Yehuda is a woman who uses the term charufa b'kudish. So here's one of the many, many, many instances that somebody who's not super learned will say, wow. The Gemara said basically that there's no Kiddushin, and or at the very best, maybe it's a suffix Kiddushin, it's a doubtful Kiddushin. And comes the Rambam and says it is Kiddushin. How could the Rambam argue on a Gemara? It's a major question. How could the Rambam, where does he get this idea to argue on the Gemara? And the answer is very simple. He knows another Gemara that you and I don't know. 95% of the time when the Rambam argues on the Gemara, it's because he knows things that we don't know. No, he doesn't. It's not. That's the beauty of the Rambam. He doesn't bother telling you, by the way, here's the reason why I argue on the Gemara, because another Gemara argues on that Gemara, and I choose to follow that other Gemara. If you want to look it up, it's Daf Vav Amid Aleph in Kiddushin. Write it down. Kiddushin. Daf Vav Amid Aleph. And here's where the Rambam and Rashi and other Rishonim say that there's a companion Gemara to this. You wouldn't know it from just learning this. And I believe it's in Gittin, like the other Gemara is on Daf Mem Daled, Mem Gimel, not because my memory is failing me, because my eyesight are failing me. Rashi says Mem Gimel. And based on that Gemara, the Rambam rules over there like Rabbi Akiva, and basically, usually there's a Havamin and a Maskana. Havamin means the original way the Gemara saw something, and then there's the conclusion, and we follow the conclusion. But here, the Rambam, the way Rashi, the Ran would explain it, is the original opinion is following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who in another area, in Gittin, we follow him. So therefore, you have two Gemaras that contradict each other. We tend to generally follow Rabbi Akiva in certain instances. We know we follow him there. Therefore, the law is like Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara in Gittin. And even though it seems to contradict our maskana, well, sometimes not all Gemaras get along. You have to pick a side. The Rambam picked a side. Okay. Now, here I got to say the Rif doesn't really I think he just doesn't say anything about Harupa one way or another. So so here's two ways to learn it. The Rambam is very innovative. He picked a side, and he goes against one Gemara based on another Gemara. Another possible argument to be made is maybe the Rambam didn't have this whole back and forth in his Gemara, because it seems that Rabbeinu Hananel didn't have the whole second part of our Gemara. Okay, let me see. Yeah.
Where's the speaking part? Which one of them?
It's Kesef. Usually Kesef, yeah.
So Kesef goes with the speaking.
Yeah, all of them need speaking. Yeah. Yeah, the Bia needs speaking. The Shar the Shar has written words. So she has to know what it says. So it's but we're talking about language, the use of a particular word. Obviously, the woman has to know what's being said. If she doesn't know what's being said, then it doesn't count. If the woman thinks the man is saying abracadabra or what's the weather like in Swahili, they're not married. And so actually, I'm not really sure. Yeah, usually we say they understand it from the context. They're under chuppah, or they're discuss a lot of the Gemara and the Rama mentioned that when you use these weird words, she has to, it's like, what are they talking about? Are they talking about Kiddushin? Do they know what Kiddushin is about? And so on. Actually, I'm not really, I don't want to say what Rabbi Hananel says here. I'm not sure if he has a different gears to the Gemara, but sometimes Rama has a different gears to the Gemara. So let's take the next case, which is number 3, the next page. The Rambam defines it as Kiddushin because he learns that it's just the word. The word means Kiddushin. The word means a relationship. That's what it means. Because we learn it out from the Hishif Chanechrafes Leish, and it's talking about a Chatzi Bas Chorin, that either she could literally be half married or figuratively be like married. So the word, it doesn't necessarily have to actually mean actual Kiddushin, but something along the line that means the underlying premise is related to Kiddushin. Okay, so now let's look at Chav Daled in Parakeh of Hilchot Ishut. The Rambam says the following. A man tells a woman, I'm going to give you this coin for Kiddushin, but it's a gift that's conditional upon it being returned. It's not Kiddushin. Whether she returns it or not, it's not a marriage. Because whatever happens, assuming she doesn't give it back, then the condition that it was given on, which is that it be returned, was not met, and therefore it's a conditional gift. So matana manas lahafsir, it's called. Now we find that term matana manas lahafsir, for example, popularized on the first day of Sukkot, when you have to take your own lulav and esrog. So when you say, "Can I have your lulav and esrog?" the person says, "I'm gifting it to you. I'm giving it to you, on condition that you give it back, because it has to be yours." But the person doesn't literally want you to keep it, so they give it to you on condition. So there's a Gemara that says, is it that in generally a gift that's given conditionally that it be returned is a form of a kinyan, it's a real thing, or not? The Gemara ultimately here says it is a real thing. in other cases. In other cases, it's a real thing, but not for a woman. You can't be Mekadosh a woman like that. Why not? If it works for other things, if it works for a Lulav and Asra, why doesn't it work for Kiddushin? If it works for buying a field, why doesn't it work for Kiddushin? If it what? If it works for Pidyon Haben, why doesn't it work for Kiddushin? You're finally, how old are you? And now you're finally getting the greater truths in life. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. The females have the power. But what does that mean? The females don't have a whole lot of power in many instances. So why here? But why? Look, she takes it. She says, okay. I mean, some girls want to get married. Well, most girls want to have the ring to be theirs. They don't want to be like, I'll give you the ring. We'll be married on condition that when I'll give you the ring, you're going to give it back to me on that condition. Like, okay. But let's see the reason for the Rambam. The reason for the Rambam is if she doesn't give it back, she didn't listen. If she gives it back, she doesn't benefit. She didn't get anything. She needs to receive something. Now let me ask you a question. If it works in all those other cases, if it's considered a matana, you hear anything? Can you give me an answer here? Why doesn't it work for now? You're right. You're right. Because she needs to get she needs to get something. But why? So we're saying there's kinyanim in general. There's how you purchase a field. There's how you give the 5 shkalim to the kohen, and all of those things are different than how you're mekadosh isha. I'm fine with that, but let's just understand what it is that we're saying. In other words, taking a woman as a wife is the same as all of those other things, but not really the same. It's not the same in that she has to get something out of it. Now, what's such a great comment? It seems like a very simple comment here in the Rambam, but the Gemara gives another reason. The Gemara says it looks like it's kinyan chalipin. And chalipin is something you do a kinyan sudar. You'll see, like a lot of times when you're at a wedding, and they ask the chassan to lift up a handkerchief in front of the witnesses to accept the chayvus for everything it says in the psuba, for example, to obligate himself. That's like a kinyan. That's called a kinyan sudar. That's a kinyan form of a kinyan chalipin. So because the Gemara's suggestion is because it looks like chalipin. Chalipin is something that's not. It's exchanged temporarily. It's not an actual. It's not a gift. It's not something that's given permanently. It's just a form of coming to an agreement with an object on hand that is a signifier that the agreement is now accepted. But it's not an actual gift. It's not a purchase. It's not. So that's the Gemara's reason. The Rambam doesn't have that Gemara, or understands the Gemara differently than the Rif. What does the Rif say here? The Rif says the following. The Rif says, like the Gemara, so at face value, there is a machlokas here between the Rif and the Rambam. You hear? Unless you want to argue that the Rambam's explaining the Gemara, explaining the Rif. You could argue that, and if you do argue that, you could bring the Rif and the Rambam together. So that's up to you to decide. Maybe the reason why Chalipin doesn't have a chalos of Kiddushin is because the Chalipin doesn't give benefits to the woman. So even though it's another type of kinyan, another type of thing that works in acquiring in other settings, the woman needs more. She is not cattle. She's not object to be sold. She's a woman. She's a person that needs to agree to be married, and she needs to get something of value that's reaching her. It's not just, it's an agreement, and also there's some benefit that she has to receive. If she doesn't have both of those things, it doesn't work. Why does? Because the Torah says so. And because there's something about the woman saying, if I'm not getting anything here, why should I give of myself? And I'm just suggesting. You got to give something.
It's like signing a contract. We have to sign a contract.
So usually a king and chalipin is like a formal agreement is entered into. So the chalipin, the suitor, the handkerchief, or even to some degree, maybe matana al manas lahachzer, a gift on Kiddushin be returned. It is a gift. It's considered like it was given. There's just a condition on the giving that it has to be returned. And there may be halachic, like for example, if when the person who has the gift says, I'm now sanctifying this object and making it hektish, we would probably say that it's hektish. Because at that moment it's his. And then he could give it back. That's the question is, can you give back hektish? I'm giving it back to you, but it doesn't belong to you anymore, please. Or did he invalidate the matana amnas lahachzer by making hektish? I think about discusses that. But let's say for a moment we say that the receiver of the gift can be makdash. That means that there's bias there, there's ownership there. There's ownership with conditions. Look, most ownership has conditions. You buy a house, there are conditions, right? So this is the condition. Or do you say the condition is in the essence of it be conditionally a temporary thing? Why isn't it just on loan? That's a good question, but for whatever reason, the Gemara says it's not a loan in every other instance. It's a real gift, except for here. So again, the question is, we can learn the Rambam in a way that interprets the Gemara, interprets the Rif, or we could learn the Rambam in a way that breaks away from the Rif and gives an innovative shot in the Gemara and in the Rif. Yes.
Well, the woman needs to have kind of form of a gift or needs to have something. What does the man need to get? The man gets the woman.
The man gets everything. The man gets married.
The woman doesn't get married.
The woman gets married also. Yeah, they both want to get married, but I'm just saying, for whatever reason,
benefits the man for getting married.
no. There's more benefits. Biologically, there's more benefits to the man. But in terms of responsibilities, there's more benefits that the husband is responsible financially for many things. The Masechet Ksubas outlines 101 things.
This long.
The Ksuba is only 5% of the obligation. And the woman doesn't have to do anything. She just shows up. And then I'm exaggerating. Of course, the woman has to do a lot of things. But
Is all what the man has to do.
correct. So again, who's gaining more? It's like any relationship. Who's giving more? They're both giving. They're both gaining. Chalipin is when the person when somebody is given something as a way of formally showing that they're entering into an agreement, like the handkerchief, and by that like a Kabbalah's Kinyan, a Kinyan suitor. You do it for your son the chametz. You do it, yeah, exactly, yeah. Okay, any other questions? There's a lot here.
Yeah.
But again, you see how the Rambam is. He doesn't take he might have the same Gemara as us, but instead of saying parroting the Gemara, he adds in a little bit. I might be explaining the Gemara. So the Rambam, in a very subtle yet significant way, makes a stand on how to interpret this Gemara. Many of the other contemporaries of the Rambam learn that really, biblically speaking, the woman would be married, but the rabbis decreed that the marriage should be invalidated, which is a mechanism the Gemara describes. Rashi and some of the other Rishonim apply it in many instances like this one here to say, biblically, the woman is like anybody else. It's an agreement, she should be married. Rabbinically, they undo the biblical marriage. The rabbis take away the Kiddushin because it looks like Halipin. And once Halipin as a category is not okay for Kiddushin, things that are associated with it, the rabbis have the power to undo Kiddushin, which is another massive discussion about what does that mean and why don't we use it today? And we do use it today, but we use it, generally speaking, in the framework of how the Gemara uses it, which limits it.
I think the Rambam ever felt the need to interpret the Rif for his generation. That's why,
Good question.
Also, who is he talking to? Is he talking to the congregation, or was he talking to the rabbin, who would then talk to the congregation?
The genius of the Rambam is your question remains unanswered. In that the Mishna Torah is a great work. It's a great halachic work. Many of the great halachic authorities, like the Beis Yosef, were big believers in the Rambam. That doesn't mean they always rule like the Rambam, but he played, because the Rif and the Rambam often agree, or say things that are very similar, and the Shulchan Aruch generally follows the lead of the Rosh, the Rif, and the Rambam, and will side with two of the three, many times, not always. That means the Rambam and the Rif, by default, will win most of the arguments and get the halacha, in many instances, to be followed by the Beis Yosef, the Shulchan Aruch, which is still widely followed in the Sephardic world today. So because of that, the Rambam has this huge influence, and obviously the first and foremost people who would benefit from that would be the rabbis. The rabbis today learn the Shulchan Aruch, and the Nosakei and the various commentators of the Shulchan Aruch, the Magen Avraham, the Taz, or the Beis Shmuel, depending on the section I'm now quoting from. I've been learning Hilchot Pesach, so that's, you have the Magen Avraham. On sections in about women, you have the commentators like the Beis Shmuel, but the Rambam is still very much in play. But the Rambam wanted something else. He wanted every man, maybe even women, to be able to have access to Torah in a relatively easy format. It's not simple, but he wanted to simplify all of the work of Torah Sheba'al Peh into one work, the Mishna Torah. And he says that. He said you could just learn the Chumash and my Sefer, and you'll be covered with the Torah Sheba'al Peh. So yeah, he had a huge project, both for the rabbis, which by and large succeeded, even though he wasn't the ultimate single authority until today in all communities, but he has a huge reach in all communities. Yeah, we're going to go down. We're going to down Meyer now. Yeah. So thank you guys for helping out here, learning a little bit. It's always great. Thank you.